so fun to sit and complain about the platform while we're on it.
I'm sure the platform loves that we do that too.
Yeah, I wonder how many people are actually like, oh God, Facebook. Yeah, I really love Facebook. Facebook is amazing. Does anyone, even the people who work at Facebook, does anybody actually love Facebook?
I don't know. Maybe not right now.
Yeah.
We're at a level of Facebook is not like flossing.
No,
it is like
no,
that is not a good.
It's more like taking the trash out
or driving to anywhere.
Yeah, just I have to do this, don't I? If teleportation existed, I probably wouldn't drive very much. Yeah. Oh no, that's a pretty good one. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think like with YouTube or something like that, I'm still like, well, I like YouTube. I mean, it's kind of stupid in a lot of ways, but I like YouTube. But like Facebook, well,
I mean, we live there. You have to. It's a little bit like going to the grocery store. Mm. You gotta go. There's stuff there. It could be fun. You can make it fun.
Do you think, this is totally speculative, of course, nobody knows the future, but do you think that like MySpace, eventually Facebook will because like there's so many of the younger generation that they're like, oh, Facebook is for old people. And like Instagram is even for old people. And like the social networks of the up and coming generations, a lot of them don't even have a Facebook profile. So I wonder, do you think that someday Facebook will lose its footing, or do you think it's like so big that it's become just a fixture? I'm curious.
I get the sense that Facebook is attempting to stay relevant by integrating all of the new technologies that are existing everywhere. And Instagram is doing a little of that as well. So right now, people are like younger people are more on TikTok, and you've got this access to interact with videos, and that's kind of cool and fun. So both Facebook and Instagram are adding technologies that allow you to use the same platform that you've been using, and then integrate some of these new, like being able to do duets with other people's videos and doing
trying to stay relevant.
Stories. Yeah. Gosh, I have a feeling that because they exist so deeply in search engines, and that it's sort of broader and bigger than these smaller, newer apps, that it may stick around for a while.
Yeah. Can I do a show and tell really quick?
Sure.
Speaking of Facebook integrating technology, you want to see what I got for an early birthday present / Father's Day present?
Yeah. Is that the Oculus?
A fancy new VR headset.
Wow.
Not the fanciest thing in the world, but it's the standalone Oculus one, which is, I mean, shockingly affordable. And like the technology for this is about 5 or 6 years old. Like that's how long people have been talking about VR seriously. And the technology has come so far. So I've definitely started experimenting with stuff. And in terms of like how it's relevant to the podcast, I mean, I'm definitely experimenting with different hypnosis things, and I'm probably going to be getting a 3D camera soon so that I can start to create material for the VR space. But interactive storytelling is a fascinating thing, and it's like the technology is young right now. Like when I put it on, and when other people put it on, some people are like, it's not that impressive, because it does still, it's very obvious that it's not, but there's something, they call it presence in VR, which is this feeling that you get where you're standing in front of a virtual table, and there's a part of you that wants to set something on that table, like in the real world. And it makes you feel like, it tricks your senses into thinking, oh my God, this is really happening. And if a person is standing right here, or I did one with like a dinosaur that's like, oh shit. And you feel the urge to like back up because it's coming into your space. No one has even come close yet, I think, to figuring out this new storytelling medium.
Right.
But oh my God, when they do, and I know that some creative geniuses, I mean, movies in the early days of movies were not good movies. It was just, they were just testing technology. And then the art of storytelling with this new medium developed over time. That's going to happen with VR, and it is going to be, you want to talk about the transformational power of stories. Video games are a taste of it, because you're participating in the story as it goes, and that engages more of your mirror neurons, so that you get to experience the reward and the highs and lows of the story.
Yeah.
But just I know, I can sense so clearly that VR is the future.
Yeah. I've been coaching a musician through the belief about the difference between performing for a camera and performing in a live space, and what the opportunities are in both. And she got a 3D camera because she's attached to the idea that she can't be, she's just not thrilled about 2D. So she got a 3D camera and tried some stuff and has been creating in that space. And I think it's funny. I was in a theater workshop this last week, and somebody played us one of the things that she had written, and it has all these specific sound effects, and it's from the perspective of lying in bed and sort of leaving your body and like going down the tube, and the difference of like the sounds in the hospital disappearing, and how different it is to have the sounds show up, so that we're having this more viscerally dropped in experience of her leaving and the distance of sound, rather than her just telling us what was happening. That ability to make things more vivid and real is pretty spectacular. I'm kind of thrilled about it. I don't have VR stuff now because what I've heard is just very video gamey, and that's not part of my world yet. And I'm still really excited about what VR is going to do. I don't know when I'll jump
give it
in.
time. Like I'm not quite as early adopter as a lot of people, but I'm still like, it's young right now, but I still want to get the hang of it. And one thing I'll say is, because it's so young, it is a bit Wild Westy, that there's not a lot of good content out there. No. So a modicum of creativity goes a long way. You're not competing with a lot of the established creative people who are doing stuff in 2D space.
Sure.
So a little bit of creativity or humor or storytelling goes. You have less competition. It's a smaller pond, I guess.
Well, and we're wanting to talk about two different movies. We wanted to talk about Contact and Avatar. Yeah. And I watched Avatar for the first time 3 weeks ago and completely forgot that it had been released in 3D. Yeah. I watched a bunch of like featurettes afterwards. I'm like, oh yeah. And the way that they described the technology that they were using, I don't know if it would translate well, but I wouldn't be surprised if somebody decides to release a blockbuster for VR. And that is what explodes the industry.
Well, I think there are games. I mean, it's important to remember that gaming, even if it's not something you're into, it's like, I can't remember the exact number, but I want to say it's in the neighborhood of 10 times more economically huge than Hollywood.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Video games make in a month what Hollywood makes in a year. And it is a behemoth of money and creative talent, and the big blockbuster games draw more people than go see the biggest movies in a lot of cases. Wow. So and those people are playing it day after day, week after week, month after month. So a lot of creative talent is being diverted in both like design and storytelling and things like that, is being diverted to video games as video games become more recognized as art. So some of the blockbuster experiences that may put VR in more people's homes, I think, are probably going to be games. And in that interactive, it doesn't work very well to just sit there with a VR headset and look around. That is not, it's not the problem with a movie, a passive experience, is where are you supposed to look?
Yeah.
Like if I'm in a 360-degree space, if the action's happening over there and I'm curious about what's going on over here, I'm going to miss what's happening. So they have to design it in a way that kind of waits for you to go over and interact with something. Well, that sounds a lot like a video game. So
yeah, that's fair.
I have a feeling that that's where it is going to explode. But the other thing I was going to say is, speaking of Avatar, like as our transition here,
Yeah.
One of the more compelling things I've experimented with in the VR headset is an app called Big Screen.
Mm-hmm.
And Big Screen is a movie theater, or to be more accurate, it's about a dozen movie theaters that you can click a button and all of a sudden you're in a different movie theater. And there's a bunch of chairs next to you and there's a big screen. And I watched Avatar because it's in 3D.
Yeah.
Because the 3D shows up on the screen, but I also can look around. And one of the coolest things about this is somebody else with another VR headset anywhere in the world, if I invite them, can sit down in the chair next to me or can sit in the chair all the way over in the other room. And we can look at each other and watch the movie together from a different perspective in this movie theater. And,
that's amazing.
And you can do it with as many people as you want, and as long as they have VR headsets. So, and I'm telling you, it's shockingly compelling that you're in there and you really start to feel like I am in this space watching a movie in a movie theater, but I'm actually sitting on my couch or whatever.
Crazy. That's awesome.
So I watched Avatar on that screen in 3D for the first time since I watched it in the movie theater. And I'll tell you, the 3D was better in the VR headspace by a lot, because those little fucking glasses that they give you are not as advanced as the technology in the VR headset. So watching the movie, not quite as sharp because the resolution is just not there, but the 3D effect was way more interesting than it was in the movie theater.
Yeah. So what I think is really interesting is that Avatar was originally written apparently in 1995, and then they didn't start in it until like 2005, and it was like made and released in like 2009, right?
Yeah.
Contact came out in 1997. So one of the things I wanted to do was like quick synopsize both movies and then sort of compare and contrast their future. Because I've been talking quite a bit on this show and to myself about reimagining the future, the power that we have to imagine what our future is like and utilizing that to shift and move culture. And here are these two movies where the inception of them was about the same time. Because Contact is based on
earlier. Yeah.
When did Carl Sagan write it?
I don't think it was too much earlier than the movie. I don't think the book had been around for a long time.
I'm looking it up just in case. Okay, it's in 85. So
it's
the theme's in 10 years before that. So still 80s and 90s was when these stories were published and started to become a thing. So Contact there is a radio transmission from a known star system, and Jodie Foster's character is the first one to discover this radio transmission from others from somewhere.
That is recognizably artificial. It's created by something, not just background noise or a pulsar.
And it's the adventure of figuring out, oh wow, we are not alone, and who are these people and how do we get to know them? So there's that movie. And then
I love that movie.
Avatar is a
Dances with Wolves.
Dances with Wolves in space.
Dances with Smurfs.
Dances with Smurfs. So it's in the future. I don't know how far in the future. Don't recall. In the future, someone travels to a mining station on an external planet, and they are trying to mine for some sort of very valuable metal material, something or other. And there are other beings that live there and have lived there and treasure this space. So it's a space colonial story. It's Heart of Darkness.
Yeah, it's Dances with Wolves meets Fern Gully.
Okay.
Have you seen Fern Gully?
I think it's been a very long time. I probably saw it when I was a tiny person.
Yeah.
And not since.
Shocking parallels. You can find YouTube videos where they're like, and then this happens, and then this happens. And you're like, whoa, that is the same movie.
Yeah. So what's interesting to me is to compare and contrast the technology. And this is a debate about how we might be able to travel to other planets and that sort of thing. So Contact, within this transmission are instructions to build a device. Eventually they figure that out. So they build a device And for one passenger, and eventually, we're this all spoilers. These are super old movies, all spoilers. Jodie Foster gets to travel to another location.
Well, allegedly.
Well, sure. Well, what happens is she has the experience for 18 hours of traveling through a bunch of wormholes in this device and then arriving somewhere and having a holographic experience. And that's fascinating. And that sort of goes on like what it is to leave. Your consciousness goes somewhere.
Right.
But your body remains. And when I've been thinking about travel and like, light years of distance, I think makes the most sense to just allow consciousness to travel, which I think is what our Altered Carbon is going through too. You just move consciousness from different bodies. It makes more sense to me to have, if you want to move around, either make a holographic experience or have like robots other places and you just sort of transfer consciousness.
Magic mirror type experience that we can just peer into another time and space. And we're talking about future advanced technologies that don't exist, and we have no basis to believe that they could exist at this point. But in terms of how it might work out, it may be far more likely that we end up figuring out a way to not physically go places in order to explore, because most people do not understand how big space is.
Right.
And the idea of physically traveling the kind of vast distances in space is more impractical by a huge degree than most people think.
I think so too. And a bunch of space and futuristic stories are based on this idea that what is likely is we'll have to figure out cryogenics.
Yeah.
Because it's going to take
wormholes, could be faster than light travel, could be cryogenics. Generation ships are another thing that people talk about, which is like, we're going to go to Alpha Centauri and we're going to take 100,000 people on a giant ship, and most of them are going to die before we get there. But the next generation or two, they'll be the ones who will get there. There's lots of ideas on it, but I agree with you. Like, it makes a lot of sense that if we could figure out a way to, let's talk about Contact for a second, because that's one of my favorite parts. There's so many good things about that story. And one of my favorite things about it is that climax of they build this thing and they don't know what it does. And they're like, okay. And there's the whole thing about building two of them, which is such a cool twist. And like, it gives you a low point in the movie, but then, and then she gets to go, and the tug and the pull and tug of whether or not she's going to be the one. And then finally she gets to, and then this thing about when you imagine it from the other side, that she drops into the space, and from her experience she travels for however long it is that she's gone, and from their experience she drops right in and drops right down to the ground. And then she's like, well, how are they going to believe me? I have no evidence except for that one little thing at the end where they're like, it just recorded static, your camera just recorded static. Yeah, but it recorded the exact amount of time of static that she said she was gone.
Yes.
And man, it's such good story writing, and it leaves you in this like kind of place.
I love the push and pull of the theology. So Matthew McConaughey is in this story, and he is a religious scholar and ends up becoming an advisor to the president. And so one of I love the push and pull of bureaucracy. She's a woman. She discovered the radio thing. She's the one that figured it out. She was ahead of everybody else, had the faith to stick around with the science and prioritize it. And she catches the eye of this multi-billionaire kooky person who funds her research, and it pans out. And then the person who stonewalled her research over and over and over again is the one that charms. It's played by Tom Skerritt, is the one that charms the country and the world into picking him to go, because she does not believe in God.
Yeah.
And that is neither does the other scientist
either, but he's at least willing to say that he does.
Right. Yeah. And so the push and pull about what it is, this faith, and to believe in something bigger than us. And I didn't. I was 17 when I watched it, and I watched it in a drive-through. I think this is the only time I've gone to a drive-through that I remember. My parents took me to one, and I cried through Star Wars 2, the second one, and ruined that experience. And there's a picture of me at home, finally quiet, with my head inside of a brown grocery bag because my dad was just done with that day. So I did go to a drive-through before, but this is the only one I remember. And I just gotten a tattoo that morning. And so I remember watching Contact with my leg up on with the air blowing on my leg and watching this movie, really excited because Jodie Foster's just rad.
Yeah.
Matthew McConaughey is kind of newish to me, but I went with my friend who was a devout evangelical Christian. And we were still quite good friends, and we had spent hours in the car talking about religion. And I was like, I don't understand why you need to have religion and all these rules. Why don't you just talk to God? Because I've been doing that since forever, and it works out pretty great. I just don't need like everybody else's rules about that connection. It seems dumb to have all these like middlemen, specifically men, in the way. And so the two of us had this just fantastic conversation afterwards about, what does it mean? Is power greater than yourself?
It is one of my favorite things about the story is that Carl Sagan's interests and insight and fingerprints are all over it, that he makes it about how would the world respond to this and what are the upsides and downsides. But also Matthew McConaughey is not an idiot in the story, and he doesn't paint him as a religious fanatic, although there is an example of that in it as well. But Matthew McConaughey is like that one scene, which I still think is so, from a linguistic perspective, is so insightful, is the thing where she's like, but you can't prove that God exists. And he says, did your father love you? And he catches her off guard with the question, did your father love you? And she's like, yes. And he's like, prove it. And I get it. And it would take the fact that example was come up with by Carl Sagan. Like Carl Sagan came up with that example, right, as someone who is probably much more of an atheist than a believer, but he's also giving credence to, but what does this concept of faith point to?
Right.
And I agree that it is very dangerous, because believing in things without evidence is a really, 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 really bad thing. But sometimes the evidence is really, really hard to quantify for some things. And that's a true thing that you have to wrestle with. And again, leave it to science fiction, right? I love the ability of science fiction to create situations where you get to explore aspects of the human condition that are very difficult or impossible to explore without a fantastical situation.
Right.
I
love the way that science is catching up with the idea that there are so many things we don't understand, that there's this greater intelligence, even in the cells and microbes working together in our own bodies to create us as living people.
Right.
Even the combinations of events of weather and solar rays and all these things that created life here, that we kind of get a sense of how it works, but we don't. And in the movie, I think they start with Matthew McConaughey. I think she's like, you're a very intelligent guy. How is it that you believe in God? And he had an experience, this larger than life, metaphysical, can't explain it to other people, but a knowing and a connection and experience such that he's like, I know that there's something bigger. It's known. And so then she gets to have this science-based, technology-driven experience she lived through and is vivid to her, and she can't explain to other people because they weren't there. And she now has this greater knowing that there's something bigger. And beyond.
I don't think this story is pro-religion. I think it's very much like Carl Sagan's perspective was that religion and religious beliefs and a belief in God is dangerous, and it's important to get that shit clear. But that's why it's so interesting to me. It's sort of like the South Park guys talking about religion and stuff with Book of Mormon. Book of Mormon is a great example of, we're going to point out the lunacy and ridiculousness and danger of these beliefs and ideas, but we're also going to be like, we get why it's important. We're not even saying what's the alternative. We're just saying like, here, look at these downsides. Yeah.
What I loved is it's a broader and more expansive, more like quantum physics based technology movie versus Avatar, which sets us up in this super tangible, we make machines and we extend life long enough to go all of the light years literally to this future planet. And so a really good friend of mine, Avatar is her very, very favorite movie. And
Really?
but I don't know why. I didn't ask. I just went with it. Avatar's favorite movie. Cool. Because it was such a big whatever. It just was in my brain as giant yay movie. And I just didn't get around to seeing it because 3 hours and I didn't know if it was going to be a bit childish and it's anime. I didn't know what the heck. And I just kept not watching it or prioritizing.
Well, I'm actually really curious. What did you think?
So I'm going to start with my first impressions. My first impressions were a moment of like, are you fucking kidding me? Because now I'm watching it many, many years after it was made. And when I learned that it was written in 95, I'm like, okay, here's where this makes sense. So the things that initially threw me out of the story for a minute. First one was there's this Colonel character. So the main character, well, no. The first thing that threw me out of the story is the main character is in a wheelchair. Mm-hmm. Part one is like, I'm sorry. We're in a future where cryogenics exists. We're in a future where we can build these massive robots that people can drive from the inside. And this person doesn't have legs. That doesn't make any sense to me. And I'm just like, well, maybe this is going to be some dumb thing, because it doesn't make any sense to me that the military has all of this tech and access, and we can put people under in cryogenics and bring them back, and we can stick humans into other beings. We can create these actual bio avatars that people can drive, and we can't give this person legs. That's dumb. That makes no sense.
You didn't think that they sufficiently addressed that? Because I felt like they addressed it pretty clearly.
Were they just, he didn't want them and he didn't have money? What was the reason?
No. It was that the operation is extremely expensive. And that was part of the motivation for going there, is that he wanted to go there. And they said, if you come here, we will pay for you to get this operation, get your legs fixed. And he couldn't afford it. And I think it's more of a comment on the economics of Earth at that time, because I think in some of in the extended version, which I don't know if you watched, they actually show some scenes from Earth, and Earth is like a shithole, and it's like the economic inequality is ridiculous, and most people live on welfare, and they show him in that environment, which it made sense to me. That part of it didn't,
and that's fine, but they don't introduce that well. They don't establish that as well as they establish how important military is, and that he's a Marine, and that they're not going to just throw him back together and throw him into their usefulness. Feels ridiculous, because he would have signed a contract to be a Marine, and then all the Marines, they have all of this fucking tech. Yeah. So it doesn't like link together for me. So that's part one. And then part two is, okay, they have all of this fucking technology, and the first words out of the Colonel's mouth are bullshit about like science is bullshit, tech is, but like the conflict with Sigourney Weaver's character that the Colonel has. I'm like, how the fuck, first of all, does your personality of the military exist in this future? It doesn't add up. It doesn't make sense. Well,
she's a scientist hippie.
Apparently,
he doesn't like the hippie. I mean, it's very.
He's like standing in a fucking robot punching, and I'm like, I'm sorry, this guy got there from cryogenics, and he's in a massive robot. He's not. It doesn't make any sense for him to hate tech and science, because otherwise he wouldn't be there. So I'm like, those words contrasting. So I'm like, okay, both of these have to exist for reasons. Because it continues like that. We can get this far into the future and have these kinds of technologies with this machismo bullshit. Like the amount of sexism towards that scientist doesn't make sense. Like, I'm like, okay, what the fuck is happening? So I'm like, okay, it must be the point. This antiquated bullshit philosophy must be the point of this story. And that's even before I get to how they treat the natives there. And so I'm like, okay, then I'm just gonna go with it because they're probably keeping our antiquated, stupid philosophies for reasons. And then I'm like, cool. All of the natives are black actors. That's fine. That is fine. That's probably the same reasons. Like, and all of the fucking people on the planet are all white people. And I'm like, no, because China. But I'm like, I learn after I've watched the movie that it's written in 1995. And it's this parable about how awful we are. And if we continue, it's going to turn into this other thing. And we're going to miss these opportunities. But I also hate it. I also hate it that we just have to perpetuate the like white saviorism and natives are the black
this
people.
Is the worst example of that.
It's so gross. It's so gross. Like my sense is that we would never be able to actually achieve this level of technology if we stay with our bullshit colonial, toxic masculine. We can't get there. We're not going to get there.
People make about the Klingons in Star Trek that like no species that acts the way that they do could ever get to that level of technological advancement because they would kill themselves and go extinct well before then. I mean, listen, when Avatar came out, it was a favorite pastime of many to shit all over that movie because it is, I'm going to call it like, well, see, this is the thing about James Cameron, right? James Cameron is very smart. He is not Michael Bay. Okay. He is smart enough to know how to write something dumb enough to be popular. And this is a pretty dumb movie that is designed to make $2 billion because it will get everybody enough.
Right.
And a lot of people watched it and are like, ugh. But it knows how to paint with a really archetypal brush.
Right.
That is like fucking, it is the epitome of popcorn.
Right.
I just want to.
And I got there.
Yeah.
I got there. Yeah. After I was like, that Colonel wouldn't. No.
He's the one of the worst characters in the thing. Like, you want to just, he is just like evil and that's it. And like, there's no depth, no development, it's just like two-dimensional characters. And everyone largely is pretty two-dimensional. Now, at the same time, I think some of the themes that he's touching on about like nature and about this little sub-story about them discovering that the whole planet is a consciousness and that all the trees talk to each other and that technology's finally reached the point where we can prove that. And the implication that Earth is dead, so we can't even test this stuff there. And there's lots of other interesting things. There's also a fuck ton of weird ass shit, like for instance, animal rape. So how do you become initiated into the tribe? You go and forcefully wrestle a dragon to the ground and shove your tentacly thing into its tentacly thing, and then make it submit to you. And by the way, how do they have sex? By putting their tentacly things together. That's in a scene in the movie. The Jake Sully and I can't remember the character's name, they have sex, and that's how they do it. So that is straight up rape. Like, that's how they submit those dragons, and nobody was like, hey, that's a little weird.
Merging together, and they're choosing each other, and it's a thing. I actually liked the dragon scene.
Oh, I do too. I'm just saying, it's fucking weird.
Yeah. It's an interesting choice to have the ability to merge energetic tail things with other creatures.
I like the concept. It's really neat.
I sobbed a lot when the character merged with that fucking panthery thing.
Yeah.
I'm like, yes, Kitty, get it.
Yeah.
It's just powerful.
And I mean, again, there's really archetypal moments, like when he swoops in with the giant dragon that nobody ever catches, and he comes in, and then he's like walking through the crowd, and it's like, oh my god, like that scene is amazing. And it's also like, stop for a moment and think about this. No one has ever thought about flying above that thing and jumping onto it. Like, he's the first guy. Again, the worst example of white savior bullshit.
Yeah.
This one and fucking Last Samurai are probably the most like versions of that you've ever seen. And both super successful movies.
Also, here we are. How are you going to get white people to see how awful colonialism is? And maybe we should stop fucking doing that.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, no, I get it. I get it.
Maybe it's not like live here and destroy it and then go somewhere else and take it over and destroy it. Like, maybe we could stop doing that. Maybe we could honor the treasures that exist here in the world we know very little about.
It also is a shockingly strange irony that this movie that has an anti-corporate, raping the planet message is a movie that made $2 billion. Like, it feels a little bit like, who are you to be telling this message? Like, did you donate all of the profits of this movie to like saving the planet? I mean, and I'm not even faulting James Cameron for that. I think James Cameron is a super talented, crazy, consistent filmmaker. He's not the best filmmaker in the world, but holy crap. Like, The Abyss is one of my favorite movies of all time.
Yes.
Aliens is awesome. Terminator and Terminator 2 are both awesome. We can ignore all the rest of those. And Avatar and fucking Titanic too. Like, dude has a track record. True Lies. Have you ever seen that with Arnold Schwarzenegger? It's been
a while, but yeah.
Another solid movie. So he knows how to make movies. And this movie is a perfect example, I think, of how he knows how to push buttons and pull strings. And it is very almost Michael Bay-y, but it's got enough depth and enough interesting stuff in it. And good performances, although I will say that main actor is like the most forgettable human being in every movie he's ever been in. Like, more than like, people talk about Keanu Reeves as like but like, I can't remember that guy's name exactly. He was in one of the Terminator Salvation. He was in a bunch of other movies, and
Sam Worthington.
That's right. He is just like, insert generic white protagonist here.
Yeah, I think I saw him in something like The Hunt for Z or the something. Maybe was he in that? I'm scanning his IMDb right now.
But they're making 5 more of these movies. I
see that now.
And then
apparently they're all filming them at the same time.
The next one, and I'm down. I'm down for this. Like, they're gonna be popcorn. They're gonna be mostly stupid, I know, but they're also gonna be Star Wars level archetypes and hero's journey shit. And the next one is gonna combine James Cameron's interest in space with underwater. So it's gonna be like a significant portion of the next episode is going to be Pandora underwater, and like, he's going to explore all these alien underwater environments, which is, I'm super excited about that. I think it's going to be neat. And it's also, the stories in the next ones are not about the characters from this one. It's about their kids. So I think that means they might actually be able to do something fresh and original. Honestly, one of the things I'm most excited about is this is just, it's fresh content. It's like, it's not based on something. So it's, what else are we getting? Even Dune, which I'm over the moon excited about, it's still an adaptation of a book. It's what is coming out now that isn't a comic book adaptation or a remake or a book adaptation. And even though this is a sequel, at least it's somebody coming up with new ideas of something. So
I think one of the things that I actually really, really liked about this specific story that I don't know if I've seen before, and other than robotics, like integrating humanoid and robotics, was that we get a character that, like, we've got the hero's journey and you metaphorically shift and change, but this character literally becomes a new person or a new being. And I love that. Actually also makes sense to me. They're playing around with this in Legends of Tomorrow in space, creating human and alien hybrids. But what's interesting about, we create a technology that allows us to inhabit another bio being, and then the planet itself merges that consciousness into this new body, which is when I started talking about at the top that it makes more sense for us to travel through the planets and galaxies as another being, because this one's for Earth.
Yeah, good point. They are actually transporting consciousness just over a shorter distance. Yeah, there's a lot of neat stuff. The stuff about the floating rocks, and the stuff about the tree and the tentacles, and the stuff about even the transmitting of the consciousness, and and
all the memories that get stored there, the souls that still remain. Yeah.
It's all pretty cool, and it's very archetypal. And if you don't think about it too hard, it works really, really well. I will say, as far as emotional, like pulling on your heartstrings too, when they fucking destroyed that tree,
God,
I was devastated. I remember people. There were news reports about people who would get like clinically depressed after watching this movie, and it was called like Avatar syndrome, and it was about people who were like, I want to go there, like, and it was the thing about this craving for the nature that we've lost. And James Cameron fucking knew that that's in there, and he's like, I'm gonna push that button. And I do think he was following in the footsteps of movies like Fern Gully and Dances with Wolves, and even I think Last Samurai was before Avatar. I don't remember. They're all an archetypal story.
As grumpy as we can get about theoretical who these white people are who show up on the waters of other places and are judgy about savages and don't learn what they need to learn, they lost their nature too. Like their tribes, they slaughtered their own tribes first
a long time ago.
Like before they wandered off and decided Africans and people in South America are savage, and the people here in the Northern Americas are savage. Like they lost their wild too.
Yeah.
Other people like Romans came, and Vikings came, and like a whole bunch of wild and connection with nature and land. Down,
which is why they went over to conquer others. And hate breeds more hate. Pain breeds more pain. I think I can sum up how the level of intelligence in this movie, and it's almost like, it makes me think of this. Those like the Nigerian prince scams where they'll like send you an email. You know how, I don't know if you've heard this before, but they will intentionally put typos in the emails, because what they've found is it's a numbers game. They're sending this out to 1 million people. And this is going to sound super judgmental, but they want people who notice the typo and go, oh, this is clearly a scam, to not email them back. They want people who are not going to notice the typo, and they're not smart enough, because those are the people they're going to be able to prey on. So I feel like there's a little bit of that that can be perfectly summarized with the fact that the mineral that they're looking to mine is called fucking unobtainium. Like, that is a thing that somebody writes down as like, this is what it's called, and they're like, you're gonna change that, right? You're just calling it that as like a placeholder for the thing, and it's that is such a unobtainium, really. Okay, I know what kind of movie we're watching now. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh yeah, I missed it. Because I'm like, at that point, I'm like, I don't care. They just think something's important enough to destroy everything over. And they don't notice that the vast resources of absolutely everything else that's happening here.
Yeah. And they don't even really explain. I think they say that it like creates energy or something. Like it's like a fuel source of some kind.
Right.
But again, the funny thing about unobtainium as a kind of wink is it's a MacGuffin. which in film terms is just an object that it doesn't really matter what the object is or what it does. That's the object that the person desires, and it's the thing you want but you can't get unobtainium, is like, okay.
Yeah. I think I'm going to go back and watch it again. Here's what I'm discovering. Whenever I jump into a movie and I sobbed, and I did have like out of body experiences, and I had some healing experience, and that longing for nature, all of that happened for me. And I'm going to watch it again because I already know now what's disappointing.
Right.
And what ends up happening is that part of my brain can calm the fuck down.
Yeah.
And it becomes more pleasurable for me to experience the movie. I did this with Ocean's 8 recently. I did it again with fucking The Proposal. Different, like Ryan Reynolds and Sandra Bullock. I saw that, and the first time I saw that, I didn't laugh. I've seen it now 3 times. Watched it again last week. I laughed so hard at stuff.
Wow, that's an amazing skill, to be able to watch something and have it not work, and then go back to it and get it to work. And I think that really does speak to the Enlightened Couch Potato philosophy of like, it's your job to learn how to dance with this thing.
Yeah.
And like, I don't know how to dance with Michael Bay, but I can definitely dance with Fast and the Furious, right?
Yeah.
Like those movies are like, oh my God, this is so stupid. Family. And I don't mind at all.
Family.
Yes. Family. Yeah, cars, nitrous, murder.
Family important. Someone win.
Yeah.
Oh
One
my
more
God.
ride.
Hobbs and Shaw. I watched that recently. I'm going to watch all the Fast and Furious, but I skipped ahead and watched Hobbs and Shaw, and I sobbed a bunch in there because family.
Yep. Those movies are not as dissimilar from Avatar as many people would think. That's the same kind of very broad brushstrokes, major, very clumsy archetypes, but fun and appealing, and popcorn. It's not Ex Machina or Arrival or Annihilation or something where you're like, those things are subtle themes and archetypes, and you have to pay attention to them. And these movies are not meant to be that. But Arrival didn't make $2 billion either, did it?
Yeah. Well, and what's interesting, I'm going to go back to Contact, and this might be the final thing I say. So I watched Contact for the second time with my mother and her husband, and my mom didn't finish high school. She does know from religion, so she's got the background and the like different. She sort of reinvents some Bible quotes, I'm pretty sure, but her husband at that point didn't speak a lot of English. So we're watching a movie that is full of science, Carl Sagan, and they fucking enjoyed it and thought it was amazing. And I kept getting very curious because they were laughing at very different things than I would expect somebody to be laughing at and enjoying and cheering during the movie. And I was like, people find themselves at whatever level that they're in. And there's got to be stuff that's archetypal enough that anyone can get what's going on.
That's a very interesting
language
point.
Or can follow the science. My mother followed the religion in it.
Yeah.
And then they said sciencey things, and she's like, oh, they're sciencing. But she glommed onto the McConaughey character in that movie. Of
course.
And I have no idea what experience her husband had in it. I think he knew people were arguing, and that was funny. And he was laughing with my mother. And I don't know the amount of language he picked up, but there was enough happening in the visual storytelling, the craziness of going on, that he followed it. And he was like, that was a really great movie.
Well, I also think, there's room in the world of art for things that are broad appeal and things that are not. So like Avatar is designed to be entertaining for the widest range of human beings possible. And I think, Avatar and Titanic are both great examples of something that hit on all levels. And you can pick them apart as being not maybe the greatest movie of all time, but the greatest movies of all time are usually not appealing to the widest, broadest base. So with Contact, as an example, that movie's a good cross-section. I think Ex Machina may be an even better movie, quote unquote, than Contact, but it's even less broadly appealing. But it speaks to people who are in a place to really get that movie or get what it's talking about. And Annihilation is even less broad. But for the people who want to hear those notes played, or those archetypal buttons getting pushed, so I think there's different movies for different purposes, and Avatar was designed, so was Titanic. Both of them were scientifically designed to make $2 billion.
Which is an amazing thing to have learned to do.
Absolutely.
I would love that formula.
Right?
Why not?
That's why you got to give James Cameron credit. He may not make the greatest movies of all time, but he does know how to make movies that appeal to something. And I remember, I know we got to go, but I remember Titanic being, maybe we'll do an episode on that one, but that was a weird experience where it was like, this is a romance. Why is a romance making $2 billion? And it's because it had so many different elements, and he knew that the technology, like the special effects, were a huge part of what was going to make people go and see it. And it's like, in that movie, I think for a lot of the audience, the romance was like, whatever. But like the historical reproduction and the accuracy and the special effects and like getting to a window into this event that's legendary, that was what made people go and watch it more than once. And for those people, they probably were pretending they didn't like the romance part, but it also got to them. And then the people who were going into it for the romance are like, well, I don't really care about the special effects, but deep down they do, because if they were shitty, they wouldn't like the movie as much. So yeah, Cameron is he knows how to be like, these elements together, trust me.
pushing the edges of technology, inventing new things, creating new visual and visceral experiences. Like I kind of want an Oculus now to watch Avatar. To see it in 3D. Cameron,
from everything I've heard, it can be a real prick. Like, he's an arrogant asshole in a very Steve Jobsy kind of way. But at the same time, you're like, maybe it's kind of justified. Like, maybe you don't have to be such a jerk about it. But when you're like, but my movie is better, you're like, well, yeah. I mean, he made Terminator for like $8 million. The first Terminator movie with like one of the greatest science fiction movies of all time. And it is so tight. I've heard some people say that may be his best movie simply because it was his most constrained. Like, he couldn't go over the top on stuff. And so it just becomes like perfect. There's very little in that movie that doesn't need to be there. But give him credit, because like, he's got a track record like very few other directors. Spielberg doesn't have a track record like Cameron. Spielberg's got lots of misses from my perspective. And Cameron, I'm like trying to think of one that didn't work.
Well, it might work better that he is kind of an asshole. Yeah. Because, well, Spielberg does the heartstrings things, and he's a very empathetic person, which may mean he misses the delivery of the art to get you there, because he's already there. If you're already dropped in rapport with the sappier things, you may not create the world that brings people. Because if you've got somebody who has to have tech so fucking realistic to feel the emotional experience, you're going to grab more people. So if you're closer to a sociopath and you create something where you start feeling something.
Yeah, I'm not saying he's a sociopath. I tend to get very cautious whenever the idea that you're better at something if you're an asshole comes up. And I think I tend to like, maybe that can be true, that you're better than some people, but I feel like there's a third option where you should be able to be better than people who are assholes without being an asshole.
I am saying that if someone is an asshole, I go back to the theory that they've probably cut themselves off from their emotions for reasons. There's a level of trauma. And that what happens in this instance of creating a visual format is that if they are able to create something that they can even feel. Right. Yeah. Then what they created must be even more over the top and evocative for other people. Yeah. Yeah. A lot of the movies that you really like are very subtle emotionally. Like it's like the emotions are like right here, and for people like me, you're watching it and you're like, is there something happening? And with
with Cameron, yeah, his emotional is like this. That's a really interesting point.
Yeah, not that I want to, continue assholery. I'm a recovering asshole.
Right.
I like this life better, and it may mean that I wouldn't make something as viscerally deep for people. I would make something subtle to experience. I don't know.
Yeah.
We shall see.
I guess
There's
maybe
plenty of
it's
life.
just like pick what life you want to have. Do you want to be the greatest in the world at something, or do you want to be happy? And if it means being an asshole to be the greatest in the world at something,
it may not be worth it.
Might not be. Well, it's not to me. There's on a lighter note. Can we leave on a light note? And then
yes, please.
If you're interested in something that I don't know, maybe it'll pull your heartstrings the way it did mine. I recently saw an interview. I don't know if the interview was recent, but the video I saw it recently. It was Drew Barrymore.
Mm-hmm.
Talking about her life in an interview, and then they zoom Steven Spielberg in.
Oh.
And her first movie was E.T.
Yes.
And she starts crying while he's on there talking about how much his parental relationship has meant to her throughout her life. And it was so sweet and so heartfelt. And it felt like just seeing her, like what I saw was 100% authenticity and bravery to just be like that emotionally real and raw with millions of people watching. And it was really sweet. And it made me think, wow, Spielberg really, I think, is a little bit more heart-centered than I can't imagine James Cameron having that conversation. I don't think that he has any little girls that he worked with that are like, you mean so much to me, and you're the first person that I ever knew who cared about me. Like,
oh god, okay, I'm gonna go watch that.
With Spielberg, I'm like, oh, I just want to give him a hug.
And I love Drew Barrymore in the sense that she did have that child actor arc that many do, and then she healed those
so they
things.
talk about her Playboy spread in the interview with Spielberg, her father figure right there, discussing how she broke the news to him. And watch the rest of it. I'll leave that.
Oh my god.
Watch it. It's pretty great. Okay.
Holy crap. Okay,
I
great.
actually went a little long here, so I really do need to go.
Okay.
But great talk. We'll figure out what we're watching next. I watched Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, the new Quentin Tarantino movie.
Yeah.
We could talk about that.
I can watch that again.
Oh, you watched it already.
I saw it on my birthday 2 years ago.
Okay. Well, let's talk about. Yeah, it has been a while, hasn't it? I've been putting it off. But yeah, we can talk about other stuff too. We'll figure it out.
All right, TV DP friends.
Later. Bye.
Bye.